So when I first discovered that John Sexton, the president of NYU, had a class called Baseball as a Road to God, I kind of flipped out. And I thought, we have to have him come and speak with us at the Game Center. The basic premise of everything that we're about at the NYU Game Center is that games matter, that they are valuable and important, that they're more than just disposable entertainment, that they're more than just childish pastime, that they can be a really important and valuable part of a life well lived, that a life spent playing games, thinking about games, and talking about games, and studying them and making them can be a valuable, well-lived life in the same way that a life spent making music or painting can be a well-lived life. And another basic premise of the Game Center is that the best way to think about and understand video games and contemporary games is to see them not just as a subset of software, to see them through the eyes of technology and digital culture, but to understand them within the broader spectrum of games and play as an important part of human life that stretches back all the way to the dawn of history. And to understand contemporary video games within the context of things like sports, things like baseball, and to see the resonance between these different kinds of games. So I'm extremely happy that he's going to come and have a conversation with us tonight on this subject. John Sexton is by far one of the most accomplished guests that we've ever had at the lecture series, in addition to being president of this august university. Before that, he was dean of the law school here. He's been the past chairman of the American Council on Education and the New York Academy of Sciences. He's a fellow of the American Academy of Arts and Sciences, a member of the Council on Foreign Relations. He has served as chairman of the board of the Federal Reserve Bank of New York. He's a historian, a theologian, a legal scholar, now a best-selling author. And by the way, the proceeds of this book go towards funding financial aid for students. So it's an extremely good cause. And he's also a beloved teacher. He's one of the few university presidents who also has a full teaching load. And so please help me welcome John Sexton.
Well, thank you, Frank. That's a very generous introduction. There are other things he could have said. And I appreciate him not mentioning the indictment or anything. But essentially, as you're going to find out, if you haven't already from this accent, is I think the principal credential I bring tonight is that I'm John from Brooklyn. And that I grew up in a certain time when it was iconic to be from Brooklyn. And my son, until his second and third children were born, was an actor. And he came to me once with a tape recorder and a list of diphthongs. And he said, talk into this, will you? And you heard that, talk, right? T-A-W-K. And I said, what are we doing this for? He says, I got to play Runty Nolan On the Waterfront, and I need to capture your accent. So that's really what's behind this book. It's interesting the way Frank positioned it in the context of what you people do here. If you look at the book, the syllabus for the course is in the appendix. And you'll see that one of the books in the syllabus that I teach each year, the readings, if I could describe the course to you, it starts with a set of readings that come out. I have a PhD in religion, and before I went to law school, I was a professor of religion and chairman of the religion department. So, and I I was doing that studying in the 1960s and then teaching in the early 1970s. I went to law school in 1975. About, I'd say, 25% of the reading for the course, there's a lot of reading. This is not a course you take casually. The students read at least a book a week. Some weeks they read two, and I mean a full book. And they have to do a paper each week, maybe a 7-8 page paper. And the question in the paper is the same each week. The question in the paper is, in these books you're reading, some of which, as I say, about 25% are on the theory of religion. And it's a particular approach to the study of religion that was the way I used to teach, which is called the phenomenology of religion. It describes religion as a phenomenon. It's not judgmental. It's not a U.S. News and World Report list of, you know, the number one religion, the number two religion, even by population. And it just says, what is the anatomy of religion? So maybe some of the stuff that you've read, William James, Variety of Religious Experience, or Mircea Eliade's Sacred and Profane, Rudolf Otto's The Idea of the Holy, that kind of writing. And one of the books that we read in that tranche of the writing, that 25% of the course, is by a man named Johann Huizinga, Huizinga. It's called Homo Ludens, okay, man the player, right? So you know this. And that's very much in the spirit of what Frank was talking about. And the students read that in the class about midway through the year. And then I'd say about 60% of the readings this year, I have to confess 55% because this year they read this book. But so say now this year 55% of the readings are baseball novels. So you could make up your own list of what you might assign, but if you want to know my two greatest baseball novels, if this side of what I'm going to talk about interests you at all, I would say number one on my list would be a novel called The Universal Baseball Association, Henry Walker. You know this? This is like, and I would imagine that for people that do gaming, I mean, this is a guy that made a game. This is a guy that invented a Monopoly game with 27 Monopoly boards operating simultaneously and interconnectedly, and that was not sufficiently complex for him. So this was with dice, and then he created the Universal Baseball Association. And it's very Joycean. If you like James Joyce, if you like the tackle Ulysses, this is the Ulysses of baseball novels in a way. And the other one I only discovered recently, I'd say about 3 years ago, is called The Celebrant. And it's about a player, frankly, because I am a deep fan, but not, I am not a person that, Peter, who's here, you'll have to talk about him in a minute, but Peter and Tom Oliphant, their two names are on the jacket of the book. It's my book, and I think they would concede that virtually every word in it is mine, but it wouldn't have happened without them. Peter was a student of mine in the very first class that took this, and then went on to graduate from Gallup and then to a career at first at Forbes and now at Bloomberg. But he's been pressing me, as his classmates did, going back to that first year to write a book coming out of the course. Tom Oliphant is was the White House reporter for the Boston Globe, and a huge baseball fan, my age, a little bit younger than me, but a huge Brooklyn Dodger fan too. Wrote a book called Praying for Gil Hodges. And he had another friend who's wrote the foreword to this book, a woman named Doris Kern Goodwin, who's also a huge baseball fan, also around my age. She's written a very famous book. She's a great historian, and you may have seen her on Meet the Press. She's quite a celebrity, but she's just Doris in our class, and she wrote a book called Wait Till Next Year. And the three of them have been pushing me, you know, to write this for forever. So the baseball novels take up about 55%, but then the last two classes, Doris and Tom come. The students read their books, and our colleague here from NYU, Pete Hamill, who's written a great baseball novel called Snow in August. I guess I've just been put on the web or somehow saying that Pete's book is my third favorite book. I didn't mean to say that, Pete. I'm sorry. It's a great, great book. And you'll notice The Natural doesn't make it into my top three. The Natural is a great book. And it's interesting when you read the book how bad the movie seems, even though most people would put the movie on their top 10 list of baseball movies of all time. And it's very interesting because The Natural appears on the best baseball novels and the best movies, but if you read, especially if you see the movie after you've read the book, it's so disappointing to watch the movie, especially the ending. The endings contrast so much. You're with me on this. Yeah. So anyway, that's the course, and each week the students are asked to write a paper, just asking again and again and again and again, a dozen times. Then they take a break and they have to do a large paper at the end of the class instead of an exam, and it's the same question every week. Is there any basis for saying that baseball is a road to God, based upon the material you have? A theory of religion that you're developing, choose to take it where you would, and the data that you see from these novels, or finally in the end, this set of old people from Brooklyn, Sexton, Oliphant, Kearns Goodwin, and Hamill, who sit there talking about the Dodgers as if they were talking about, the mystery cult of Eleusis. and what is it possible? They've seen something, and what do you see? This year I had to make the decision as a curriculum matter whether I would assign this book. A student said to me earlier today, a student that was at an event for the ambassadors that show people around, and he said to me, I have regret I'm getting out, and I haven't taken your course, but now I can read the book. Well, it turns out the book, they all did a bait and switch on me. They said, you taught the course, you can just teach the book, but I can't say to you, go read Eliade and the Iowa Baseball Confederacy and write a paper, and then come back and read the next chapter. It doesn't work that way, so I had to reconceptualize everything. And I came up, the taxonomy of the book is that there are 9 innings in the book. So it starts with faith, and then doubt, and then conversion, and then there's saints and sinners, and blessings and curses, community and nostalgia, the things you would think about. Those are the 9 innings, and then there's a pregame show. The old Dodger pregame show was called the Knot Hole Gang, so that's kind of the prelude. There's a 7th inning stretch, and then there's a clubhouse show. So there are 12 units to the book. And it asks the question, and tonight's principally going to be a little storytelling, and then Frank will ask some questions, and we'll open up for questions. But he told me to tell stories and tell you about the book for a while, so I'll do that. But let me just give you the punchline right away, okay? So because the stories have their own punchlines, and you can kind of test what I'm saying. So the course started. Is it okay if I move?
Yeah, it's fine.
The course started at NYU's Villa La Pietra. This is the Florence estate that we have, and we had an event there. I don't think any university has ever had an event quite like this event. There was 7 heads of state at Villa La Pietra for 3 days, including the President of the United States. And I was the dean of the law school. We were running this event, and we did a lottery. And we had 150 people there. The 7 heads of state each got 10, including a head of state. So that was 70 off the table. The other 80, I'm making your life difficult.
No.
I'll sit here.
No, it's fine.
The other 80 were NYU folks. There were 10 students. There was 10 staff people. We just ran lotteries. There's some faculty and so on. And then there were some volunteers that worked the event, and we finished the event, and we get the call from the airport. I mean, this is intense. You can imagine what it's like for 3 days. Just make sure there's coffee for everybody, and, you know, is Schroeder angry at Jospin, and can we separate them, and, you know, and so forth, and well, President Clinton wants us to do this. And and this is like the most tense I think I've ever been at any professional thing I've had to do. And we get the word from the airport, the final one, it's called Wheels Up. Wheels Up, you know, they're gone. They're not our responsibility anymore. And we're having a big party at Villa Lafayette for everybody who worked in this event. And this guy comes up to me like this, and it's like, what's your name? Bobby. So I don't know Bobby, but yeah, he said Bobby, because I didn't know this student at all. He was working the event, I'd seen him around. He says, I understand you're a big baseball fan. He said, I can't imagine anybody having a whiff of interest in something as boring as baseball. Now, I had this phenomenal teacher in high school by the name of Charlie. He said, that's a story for a whole other day, but he would have fit in with you people like you wouldn't possibly believe. I mean, this was in the 1950s in Brooklyn, New York, with working class boys at a high school. And this guy who looked like, at the age of 30, he looked like Colonel Sanders. I'm not kidding. And he had, somebody said, you know, I say this today to students, or some people don't know the names of the people, but you folks will. Somebody said about him, he had the body of Orson Welles, the voice of James Earl Jones, and the soul of St. Francis of Assisi. So maybe before the new Pope, you wouldn't have gotten St. Francis of Assisi, but now you got the whole shit. And this was Charlie. And he arrived at this high school in Brooklyn, which the Jesuits ran in Crown Heights. And the Jesuits had lightning in a bottle. They knew that. They knew this guy was a magical teacher. But they didn't know what to do with him. He didn't fit into any of the standard boxes. He had a PhD in English from Columbia, so they let him teach English. But that seemed to be underutilizing it. So they took 12 of us in 1956, and you know, I was a year younger than grade 12 or 13, or 13 or 14, 13 or 14, I guess. And they give us Charlie for an hour a day, 5 days a week, for our sophomore, junior, and senior year, for a course they just called Charlie. And this is the way his whole thing, which fits perfectly, I think, was think strange. Boys, I'm going to teach you to think strange. I'll give you just one Charlieism because it's lived with me for the rest of my life. It was the first words he ever said. He came into the class. He looks like Colonel Sanders, right? Premature white hair and so forth. This immense being. We got this course because they gave you your programs. You didn't sign up for this. You got Charlie. What the hell is it? 9 to 10, 5 days a week. We're sophomores in high school. And he walks in. He looks at the 12 of us. We're barely pubescent. And in that voice, he says, first words, not my name is Mr. Winant. Boys, on the first date. He pauses and he's got us. He says, find out her SAT score. He says, beauty fades, but the need for conversation never will. See, he always would, it was kind of oxymoronic learning, right? So this kid comes up to me, and by the way, for those of you that will never have a chance, I just want to put a footnote here. Gene Shepard, okay? That's the way I talk. WOR, 9 to 11, 5 days a week. The late 1950s, early 1960s, the first talk show ever, but no guests, no calling in, just working through the epicycles of conversation based upon observation. So that's essentially what the book is, and it's essentially what I'm doing with you. You probably have some name for it. But in any case, Charlie is in the background, when this kid comes up to me with this pugnacious question. And I said, I don't know why. You know, why does the muse strike? You know, why do you think of what you create, right? I look at him and I channel Charlie, both in his voice and in one of his phrases. When he wanted to say to us, you just don't get it. He would say, you are among the unwashed. So, and Lord knows what level of meaning. You know, language has so many meanings. Like I taught the play a couple of weeks ago, the great play. If you haven't read it, read it. The great baseball play, Take Me Out. Okay, which is essentially about a gay Derek Jeter and how his coming out. Okay, but there were 5 meanings to the title that the class came up with. You know, you are among the unwashed. He could mean any number of things, right? He could be making a reference to the caste system. He could be making a reference to Oda. Anything. So I say to this young man, you are among. So now I'm channeling Charlie, and I say, you know, great one. That was another one of his phrases. He always referred to you as great one. You know, great one. If you will read 12 books that I will assign you, and write a paper on each as an independent study, you will discover that baseball is a road to God. The words just came out of my mouth, okay? Baseball is a road to God. Notice a road, okay? So pick your game. We are pluralists. We are not triumphalists. So one of the books the students read, just to give them a little taste of this. One of the novels they read is Hemingway's The Old Man and the Sea. And it was interesting because when I was preparing for that class, I was with my daughter and her fiance on spring break, and we went deep sea fishing. Caught nothing, which of course didn't matter. But I was thinking, if fishing has some of the contemplative qualities of baseball, you know, what people experience as boring, ultimately one can think of as cultivating the contemplative skills. You know, contemplating the sound of one hand clapping is boring. Okay, but when one has the breakthrough, it's unbelievably rewarding. So, and of course in Hemingway's book, The Old Man and the Sea, Santiago says, I would like to go fishing with the great DiMaggio. His father was a fisherman, you know. It's one of the great, and he keeps going back to, as he's out going back to, you know, what's going on in the Yankee games. The great DiMaggio is taking care of it. And then the great DiMaggio, I had to read, if you haven't read, Gay Talese's great New Yorker piece on DiMaggio in his 50s. You know, and the great line when he's on his honeymoon with Marilyn Monroe in Japan. And the USO general finds out Marilyn Monroe's in town. And a message comes in, will you come and see the troops? She says, do you mind, Joe? He says, you do what you want. It's your honeymoon. And she comes back and she says, Joe, it was unbelievable. There were 100,000 people cheering. You've never seen anything like it. And he says, Talese quotes him saying, yes, I have. And the earlier question from where Talese is interviewing the oldest of the DiMaggio boys. There were four DiMaggio boys. 3 of them played Major League Baseball. And famously it was said Joe was the best hitter, Dom was the best fielder, and Vince, the oldest, was the best singer. And Vince has never gone into the fishing business. Okay, never played Major League ball. He played baseball, but only out in San Francisco. Never played baseball. If I said that, I was wrong. And lives north of San Francisco. He's a carpenter. He's got a marriage of 45 years. He's got children and grandchildren. And Talese notices in his closet there's one suit. And it's a tailor-made, expensive suit that was given to Joe. And Talese says, he ever jealous of Joe? He's never, by the way, had the suit altered. Never had the suit altered. Never wears it. It's given to him by Joe. And he says, maybe Joe's jealous of me. Maybe he'd like to have what I have. And so you put that together with Hemingway's The Old Man and the Sea, and you're beginning to get a sense of what might be going on in the dynamic of the conversation in the classroom. So the punchline on the course is this, and I'm gonna do this, and then I think I'm gonna tell you 2 stories, and then we'll open it up. Okay? So I just want to give you the punchline. The course started out simply challenging Charlie. I mean, it was just, I had one purpose with that student, and that was to get him to think strange. I didn't care how he ended up thinking about baseball. I didn't care how he ended up thinking about religion. I just wanted him to think about, a kind of oxymoronic question. I mean, baseball as a road to God. Just thinking about that, Charlie would have said, was worthwhile. So I did it with the young man, and things didn't go viral in those days, right? But it went viral on the NYU campus, and there's a whole line of students the next year to sign up for this directed research, and he was one of them. And so I was in a puzzle because I said, I can't do all these directed researches. So I said, I'll do a seminar, and I said I'll limit it to 20 kids. I then, by the way, it's called the dean of the college. And said I want to do, I've always taught, at least, now I was dean of law school at this time. I used to teach 2 courses in the law school. My man Wayne is here. What year did I teach you?
86.
And we haven't seen each other. I mean, it's been wonderful that he walked in tonight. And he's important to you. He can employ you. But that's why he's got the tie and jacket on. But the first thing I did was I said, okay, I've been teaching this course to freshmen, because even when I taught 2 in the law school, like when I taught him, I taught 1 undergraduate freshman class. So I called the dean of college. I said, I got a second course I want to teach. The one I was doing before was on religion and government. And he said, so what's it called? I said, Baseball is a Road to God. Now, religion and government, I guess, is in the politics department. So Matthew says to me, well, what department does that go in? So I said, screw you, Matthew. I'm going to Gallatin. So I went to Gallatin. This course is a Gallatin course where I don't have to explain it to you. How could you even have such a course? So I make them, the students have to read Mircea Eliade, Sacred and Profane, and they have to read the Iowa Baseball Confession and write a paper, and then based on how good the papers are, I let them in. And we had 16 students that year. Yep. And then we had fun. So we did it all through the summer. Mm-hmm. We met every week during the summer, and that's when they started pushing me to write the book, and then I've done it since then. But the only objective I had was to get them to think strange. Then suddenly 2.0 was, wait a minute, this is getting them to think about religion and baseball a little differently. Because given the approach I take to religion, it kind of strips it of the stuff that gets in the way of the religious experience. See, so first of all, we're not triumphalists, so we're not saying, here's the truth. Here's the church. And the second thing is we're not into the structure or the hierarchy, of it. And the third is we're not into the dogma of it. So we kind of accept, take Uluru. You've all seen, even if you don't know it, you may have been taught to call it Ayers Rock. Okay, Uluru is the native Australian name for it. And when I walked with my children through the outback, which is this immense flatness, I mean, you can't imagine how flat the outback is, unless you're from Australia, of course, which you may be. But you just can't, if you've not been there, you can't imagine it. I mean, I've fallen in love with this country. footnote. I'm going to tell you something, just so it was worth your coming tonight. Because we are a research university. Okay? I'm going to give you something I would never have guessed. Okay? Do you know? Now, just tell me honestly if you know. There are 1 million wild camels in Australia. Anybody that made the kangaroo, the thing we think of, they're 1 million because the British, and they are the healthiest camels in the world. Because the British brought them from Afghanistan because their horses were dying in the outback. And it's camel heaven. There's no predator. You're the top, and it's like the Lion King for camels. And you got all this food there. The outback is like, an all-you-can-eat Denny's. Or 1 million. So you see these camels and this vastness, and we flew 3 hours without seeing a road. And then you land, and you're out there, and a native Australian takes you, and you see this beautiful Uluru. Now, this is the largest continuous civilization in the world. The cave paintings at Altamara are 10,000 years old. I saw cave paintings 100,000 years old. They go beyond carbon dating. And to the Aboriginal, or to the native Australian, this is Axis Mundi. This is where the planes meet. This is the channel. And it's the most sacred thing in the world. To me, I'm looking at it, and it's beautiful. But it's a nice rock. Now, if I had a priest with me who in the outback took bread and wine and consecrated it, to me, as a Catholic, after the words are said of consecration, it now signifies something glorious. To him, it's still bread and wine. And that's the way the phenomenology of religion operates, Not to say he's right or I'm right. We're having different experiences. The sacred, Eliade says, is that which is not profane, and the profane is that which is not sacred. And we humans throughout life, and we frequently use games and to do it, games and ritual. How close does that get? In the Iowa Baseball Confederacy, when Gideon passes through Axis Mundi and discovers himself at the baseball game which his father swore existed and everybody on earth denied. And there it was, a Chicago Major League All-Star team playing the All-Stars, the Chicago, what was it? It was the Cubs, the Chicago Cubs, the actual team, playing an Iowa Baseball Confederacy All-Star team. And there it was, on July 4th. And the game went on for 40 days and 40 nights and ended in a flood. And people had denied it existed. And there he was. And he had to then put together the two lives that he now had. And the love he had there and the love he had here. And so this Axis Mundi, be it Uluru or be it the Eucharist or whatever. Okay, so I don't care, I would, in 2.0, say to my students, what you end up thinking of, I just want you to think about it. And I want to strip away the garbage that's associated, the power stuff. And then 3.0 got really interesting. Because this is what ultimately persuaded me to write the book. And baseball, now many of you may not be baseball fans, and about a third of the students in the class have never been to a baseball game. By the way, about a third of them would describe themselves as completely ignorant of religion. And it's about 50-50 men and women. And this year is the first year, I've done it 11 years, this year is the first year I actually have a Major League Baseball player in the class. He's a freshman here at NYU. He played for the Chicago Cubs. He was #1 draft choice of the Phillies. and then worked his way through the Rule 40 stuff, and ended up last year, made it to the major leagues. Has baseball cards and so forth. One of the people in the class called me up this week and was very excited because they said, I went on eBay and there's all kinds of stuff of ACs, there's baseball cards and this and that. We should buy one and surprise him in class with it. Okay, because last week, this past class, and I'm trying to show you last week we had a fellow bring in baseball memorabilia, the relics. Okay, you see it? See, it's the same thing is what I'm trying to get the students to see. So we held in our hand the $25,000 check, which was the last payment by the Yankees to the Red Sox for the contract of George Herman Ruth. It was endorsed on the back saying, in full payment for the contract of George Herman Ruth. It was 5 $25,000 payments. And that later became the curse of the Bambino, not for another 70 years, because of course everything associated with Boston is a fraud. But that's a different story. But so one of the young people says to me, John, we should buy something and surprise him. I said, don't you get it? He's selling. Nobody cares about AC. He batted 29 times. He's got all his cards and everything on there. So we bought the most expensive one, which was like $2. But you know what we began to notice, all of us, is that as you become more and more, as you penetrate the boredom or the slowness, what you end up finding is that there's unbelievable significance in the microscopic. So a 1-0 count is different from a 2-1 count. And both of those counts are different if there's a runner on base or a runner on first and third, or how many outs there are. And it's a kaleidoscope. And the way you've got to become an active fan. Like when I go with friends or with my son, we're always saying, now what pitches he go? You got to know the portfolio of pitches that the guy has. You got to know the weaknesses of the batter. So there's this great moment. There's a great documentary called The Brooklyn Dodgers, The Ghost of Flatbush. And I'm going to let you do, what is that play where they changed the ending on Broadway? I took my grandchildren to see it. The Mystery of Edmund Drood. The Mystery of Edmund Drood. So I'm going to do that with you here, because I'm going to tell only one story, because I want to get to questions. But you may choose the October 4th story, or you may choose the Doubt story. They're both great stories. You can't go wrong. Okay. But probably you should choose the Doubt story because the October 4th, 1955 story, you can go watch this documentary called The Brooklyn Dodgers, The Ghost of Flatbush. And they had found out about my story. And they came to the office to interview me. There were only two things before my wife's death. There were only 2 times that I appeared on television during all my time as dean and all my time as president, that it wasn't about education or my portfolio as dean or president. All the time they would want me on religion and law cases, because in the 80s I was the lawyer on most of the ones that went to the Supreme. I didn't want anybody to think it was about me. I wanted to know it's about the school, it's about the school, it's about school. I made 2 exceptions. One was in 2006, I've been on again recently with the book, but in 2006 I went on the Colbert Show, just because she loved Colbert and I was trying to impress her. We've been married 30 years, but I spent my life trying to impress her. But and then the second was I couldn't resist this documentary on the Dodgers, because I hadn't written the book yet, but I just couldn't resist it. And that morning I remember her saying to me, and this is very important for artists to know, we were talking earlier today about how I believe in mythos. And I always used to say to people at the law school, you care too much about facts and not enough about truth. Truth is the domain of artists. Truth is the domain of music, of poetry. Truth is the domain of religion. And you get caught up in the facts. And that's why I need him when I have to know who holds the record for the you know. So you know, so Lisa that morning, as I left, she had me set my television clothes, and she said to me, "You know, honey, your stories about the Dodgers are great, but this is going to be on national television." She said, "Are you sure they're true?" You know, and as I went through the park, I began to have some doubt, you know, but that'll connect this up. But the point is that if you look closely and you say, okay, so this the way I got to the Dodgers story is there's this great moment in that documentary where they have Tom Oliphant, who also helped with the book, and he's telling the story because his book Praying for Gil Hodges about that day. And he didn't speak to his father a lot. His father was a very laconic man who had, as a 6-year-old, been given a scholarship to Juilliard. And then his hands had been ruined in the war. And he was working, you know, as a laborer because he couldn't be any more what he was. And Tom describes him in the book. It's a beautiful father-son book. And there's this kind of dourness about it. But nonetheless, Tom felt loved. And Tom himself was a very gifted musician. And even though he was poor, had been brought into a school named St. David's, which was, you know, largely for, it's still a very upper crust school, but they bring in a few people to kind of mix the mix. And Tom was part of the mix. And I guess the head of DuPont kid was his best friend. And DuPont made the first television. And Tom got scarlet fever. And this friend's father sent a television, which the family called Scarlet. So even though they were poor, they had a television. And on October 4th, 1955, which was the day the Dodgers won the World Series for the only time in history, right? The Dodgers have only won the World Series once. There's a version 2 of the Dodgers that has gone on to win other World Series, but we don't reckon, they're in schism. But Tom and his father sat and watched the game, and his father had kept him home from school. His father had come into him that morning. He always woke him up in the morning, made him breakfast. He says, "Oh, you're not feeling good." Tom says, "I feel perfect." No, you have a fever. Tom said, it took Tom a while to get it that his father was saying, "You're staying home from school today." This World Series was during the day. And Johnny Padres is pitching, okay? And the last pitch, Tom's father turned to him and said the only word he had said all day long. And in the documentary, they get it perfect, because I'm telling my story. They've got Gil Hodges' wife saying, I was praying. She's like this. She's still alive. I love her. She's like shaking like this. She's in her 90s, you know, and it was just wonderful. And then they go to Tom, and Padres is winding up. They got the kinescope. And he says, my father turned to me and said the only word he said all day, change up. And the pitch was a change up. But that's the way you have to watch your baseball game. You know, what's the pitch going to be? And you don't follow the ball. There's some great lines in the Celebrant, the Iowa baseball game, where the baseball fan knows to follow the field, it's not the ball. Okay, so you would have missed Derek Jeter doing the flip if you had followed the ball. Okay, you want to see that ballet when a ball goes to the gap and the runner is this and the pitcher is there and you know, a fly ball goes to the outfield. If you watch the outfielders, you never have to worry where the ball's going. You watch the outfielders; they know where it's going. They have this instinct. All right. So what we learned in 3.0 was that this was the skill of contemplation. I'm calling it live slow. You know, in this blisteringly, where taking a drink of water is like taking a sip from a fire hose. This is the timeless game. This is the game that could go on for 40 days and 40 nights. This is the game that is meticulous. It's like one of those Fabergé eggs, you know, and you gotta look at each little piece of it, and there's always something to probe. And then there's, you know, as Yogi said, you never see it all. Should I stop now, or should I tell the
One more. Do the story, the other story.
Which do you want?
The what was the
Doubt?
The doubt. Yeah.
Okay.
Finish up with the doubt.
All right, the doubt story. It's a good thing to start with, or to end with rather, because we should have doubt. And you prepare the coda. Okay. We got a great coda to this story too. Yeah. So doubt. So chapter 1 in the book is sacred space and sacred time. So you could kind of play that out. Just from what I told you, I would think you'd be able to play that out with the orb, you know, and the stadium. So opening day, the World Series, you get the whole notion. So then faith, and then doubt is the third chapter. And the first thing we say, which is important theologically. So the whole argument is to get you to look at religion and baseball and have an aha moment where you see structurally the same thing's going on. And then what you learn from that, or what that tells you, that's up to you to figure out. But I just want you to see that structurally the same thing is going on. So when I say structurally, I mean intellectually, heuristically, okay? So the chapter on doubt, the first point you make is that doubt, there is no faith if there isn't doubt. Faith is meaningless if there's not doubt. If there's no doubt, don't have faith in anything. So we want to teach the lesson of the danger of certitude. And the danger of thinking you have truth with a capital T. This is what sends people off to burn other people with this thing. This is what sends people off to do crusades, is they think they have truth with a capital T. And my truth is better than your truth, so much better than your truth, that you are, quote, the infidel, close quote, and I am going to kill you. So this is the theme of the chapters. Beware of being... I'll move over. Beware of thinking you have the truth with a capital T. This is the lesson of the research university. Be skeptical. Okay? So there is this guy. I wish I'd brought him. His name is Tippy. Now there are only 2 pictures in the book, and if you come up later, I'll be able to show you. The picture on the dust jacket on the back is a picture of me throwing out the first pitch, and it's in Washington at a Nationals game against the Mets, and it was David Strasburg's first game. So I threw the first pitch of David Strasburg's first game, and it was a strike. I want you to know. I did that. How he did, I don't know, but I have no doubt he will do better than me in the fullness of time. But for those of you that don't know baseball, this is like the #1 pitcher in baseball, everybody believes at this point. He's got like a 200-mile-an-hour fastball. So the other picture in the book is this guy, Tippy. Now, Tippy is like the quintessential Damon Runyon character. Okay, I mean, if I had Tippy in here, you couldn't believe Tippy. If you want, at the end of the night, you could tell me for the last story, tell a Tippy story that's not in the book, which I told to the class, because Tippy was in the class this week, and it just brought the house down. But it would only be if you really want to milk this character, Tippy. But Tippy works for a car service, and my family started using the car service shortly after we came to New York, because we don't have a car. And then if I'm going to a place that where NYU, like if I'm going to Jersey or something like that, Tippy will drive instead of taking one of the security guards and getting that out because it might be needed for an emergency when kids are around here or something like that. So Tippy drives a lot, and he's been driving 25, 30 years. And you never want Tippy to get out of his car. You know, if you take one of these black tops, usually the driver will be nicely dressed and get out of the car and open the door. You know, you have to tell him, don't do it. Tippy has never been tempted to open the door. and thank God, because if he ever began to get up from the front seat of the car, you would see the full moon. Because his pants are never fully up. You know, he's this immense man. And he talks in a kind of sputtering way. But he is unbelievably informed about baseball. He is. I'm not calling him an idiot, but you know the phenomenon of the idiot savant that can tell you what day of the week a particular date is, you know, and can multiply 8-digit numbers and come up with the right. This is him on baseball. You would not have to buy the baseball encyclopedia. You would just have to have a cell phone with Tippy's number, and you call him up and you do. Okay. So over the years, he has regaled me with trivia, and as I said, I'm not a trivia person. But if you love the game as much as I do, and people give you like some of the best trivia ever, there's almost an irresistible temptation to use it. And I have succumbed many times to that temptation. And this could be very bad for me, but I'm going to admit it here. I have never given Tippy credit. I have not footnoted my work. I have plagiarized. Okay, not in writing, anything I've written, but in telling stories at ball games, I have used things that Tippy is my source and my only source. And I have not referred to Tippy with appropriate, you know. So he had two just of the greatest speed. Because if you think of something that happened only once in the history of baseball, you know, now I'm not talking about Don Larson's perfect game. There have been other perfect games. Once in the history of baseball, and you can get people's attention with that. And then if it's place relevant, which both of these things I'm going to tell you are, if it's place relevant, man, that is salacious. So, first piece of trivia from Tippy: only once in the history of baseball has someone hit an inside the park grand slam home run. So you're at a listless Yankee game, it's the third inning, you got guests, you throw out that question, you know? And as they struggle, you give hints, you say, in the ballpark today. You could do that up until 2007. And then you work it out. It turns out the answer is Mel Stottlemyre, who was in the ballpark as the Yankee pitching coach. It made sense. It was a pitcher. The outfielders are in, the monuments, you know, it was rookie season. Okay, fantastic. That one was so good. Our first graduation at Yankee Stadium, I gave it to the students as a gift. In my speech at Yankee Stadium, I said, before you leave, I'm going to tell you something happened in these hallowed grounds. And I give them this as a gift. It probably was broadcast out on the internet and everything else. Second piece of trivia: only once in the history of baseball did a person get up. Now, a lot of people did the first part of this, and in his first at bat hit a home run. And about 50 people have done that. His second at bat hits a triple. Never happened. Only once in the history of baseball. Home run first at bat, triple second at bat. And then, especially if you're at Yankee Stadium, or in New York, you can start laying out things and you can say, person had a 20-year major league career. Person never hit another home run or another triple. Person pitched a no-hitter that first year as well. So now you know it's a pitcher. Person's in the Hall of Fame. Now people are pulling their hair out, you know. Person played for one of the 3 New York teams. I guess you have to say 4 if you count the Mets. We're talking a different time period. So, person played for one of the 4 New York teams, and then you say, person's in the Hall of Fame as a relief pitcher. Even though he pitched a no-hitter, first he was a starter to become a relief pitcher. Anybody got it? Now you'll get it. Now you'll get it. Person's famous pitch was a knuckleball. Still no one? Sic transit gloriam. Hoyt Wilhelm. Okay? Hoyt Wilhelm, the great reliever for the New York Giants in the 50s and 60s. So these are the two, you know, and I must have used these a couple hundred times around the world in different places, you know, for various reasons, you know, because I'm a storyteller. So now, notwithstanding what I just said about the Mets, Fred Wilpon is a friend, and he is vexed. He's tormented by the fact that I'm a Yankee fan. Now, I was a Dodger fan. I'm now a Yankee fan. You got to read the chapter on conversion to understand that. But Fred says, why did you convert? You know, it was so natural. You know, I've done the Jackie Robinson Rotunda. You've got a little thing on here. My academic gown has a circle with the number 42 on it. Okay, it has for 12 years. I'm not one of these newcomers to this number. It's right there. The book, the cover has the number 42. What Fred will occasionally call me up and say, I want you to come to a Monday night game. And when he says that, it means it's just going to be me and him. That he's had to entertain people over the weekend. He's tired. He just wants to watch a game with someone he can talk baseball. So he calls me up and he says, I want you to come to a Monday night game. This is 3 years ago, first year at Citi Field. And it's around June. And he says, there's going to be another guest. He said, you're going to be surprised. This is a person that knows an enormous amount about baseball. And he too is a Yankee fan I'm trying to convert. Henry Kissinger. So I had a professor, one of our professors coming in from Europe. I promised her we would go to dinner. And I said, I'm sorry, Fred, and he says, no, bring her. So I bring this professor, forgetting that she is a European historian with a specialty in the 18th and 19th century, which of course is what Kissinger is. So we're watching a June Met game with two 19th century European historians who somehow think it's interesting to spend our time talking about the Congress of Vienna or Metternich, you know, and this stuff. And it is, you know, Fred and I are looking at each other, and the Mets are not doing anything to help us. And we're in agony, you know, as this is going on. So it comes to the fourth inning, and I say, I gotta do something here. So I say, Dr. Kissinger, Fred tells me that you are an encyclopedia of baseball. I am going to restore your faith in the research university. I am going to reveal to you something that my research has unearthed. That has happened only once in the history of baseball. Oh, it couldn't be. With all of the games and all of the towns, you know, that something has happened only once in the history of Major League Baseball. And I give him the Stottlemyre question. He is aghast. In fact, it turns out, those of you that will remember after 9/11, the city of New York did an ad saying, in New York, anything is possible. They had 4 celebrities. One of them was Henry Kissinger. And it turns out, I had forgotten this, his fantasy always had been to hit an inside the park home run. And they showed him, he said, thank God they didn't make me run the bases. He said, I did slide into home. You know? So he's just excited. He said, oh, you're right, I can't believe this. I said, I got another one. I get him to Wilhelm. Now it's the eighth inning, and the Mets are down by 3, and they get up in the bottom of the 8th, and they send up this journeyman infielder to pinch hit with the bases loaded, and the guy hits a grand slam home run, not an inside the park, but he's a grand slam home run. His name is Fernando Tatis, and the Mets win the game. And we're coming down in the elevator from the owner's suite, and about 15 fans are on there. And you know the way elevators get silent, and Kissinger breaks the silence. He says, ladies and gentlemen, we are in the presence of greatness. So of course everybody thought he was referring to himself. He says, this is Dr. John Sexton, and he has restored my faith. He uses my phrase in the research university. By telling me 2 things tonight that have happened only once in the history of baseball. Now, in the meantime, just before I got on the elevator, I had called Tippy, who's down in the parking lot, to drive me home. And he had given me a 3rd piece of trivia. and everybody's getting off, and I say, now, before you leave, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to give you a gift and give Dr. Kissinger yet another gift. Only once in the history of baseball has a person hit 2 grand slam home runs in the same inning. Got it? Not the same game, the same inning. And that person, ladies and gentlemen, is Fernando Tatis. The guy that we just saw hit yet another grand slam home run. So the place, they're applauding, and it's almost Palm Sunday, you know. And out I go, and I get in the car. 2 weeks later, I'm at a Yankee game with a friend of mine and his son of a gun. Now, I told this story last week in the cathedral in Philadelphia. packed house at the Cathedral, and Tippy was there because he had driven me down to Philadelphia. And I said, I referred to this guy as a snot nose. Okay, that's not the word Tippy used later to refer to this guy. And Tippy exclaims, he's sitting there where you are, right? And I'm talking to this, and I got 12 Augustinian priests, enough to say a high mass sitting there listening to me. And Tippy says, that's not what I called him. And I made the mistake of putting the microphone in his face because I wanted him to hear Tippy's voice. I said, so what do you call him? He said, I called him a scumbag. In the middle of the cathedral, the priests almost fell off their chairs. But in any case, this snot-nose, who's now a federal judge, is sitting there next to me, and it's a listless Yankee game, and I tried out the Stoudemire question. This brings you right back home where you want to be. He takes out one of these. And he says to me, I don't believe that. And I look at him and I say, Jesse, I am the president of NYU. I am the head of one of the great, research institutions in the world. I am the embodiment of fact and knowledge. Who the hell are you to doubt what I tell you? He starts. And about an inning later, he says, wait a minute, I got here that in 1968, Roberto Clemente hit a walk-off, in other words, the end of the game, inside the park grand slam home run. So now I respond just the way the popes did to Galileo. Right? Watch the structure of this. I say, you can't trust that technology. I have the truth. Right? And it's wrong. 2 innings later, he's got 49 people. A list of 49 people since 1900. 10 or 11 of them in the last 15, 20 years that have hit inside the park grand slam home run. It is just completely untrue. Where Tippy got it from, who knows? But now I have meanwhile said this to the graduates of Yankee Stadium. I've told Henry Kissinger, they think I've said this. I plagiarized this, and I plagiarized on the phone. So of course, I get in the car, and Tippy's first reaction is exactly the same as the Pope's. He says, if that bastard, Jesse Furman, hadn't told us the truth, we could have gone to our graves happy. So then I say to him, as you would expect me to say, well, Tippy, if Stoudemire isn't true, what about Wilhelm? And just like the Popes, he says, every other blipping thing I've told you, you can count on completely. And a week later, my son finds out Wilhelm did not hit the triple until the next season. That's wrong too. So I say now to myself, it's one thing for my truth, my veracity to be, but Henry Kissinger, because Kissinger's going through the world telling the story, and he's not quoting me. And world peace depends on his credibility. So now I have to, do I tell Kissinger or not, which I have not done, although it's in the book. And in the book, we end the chapter by saying, the last sentence in the chapter is, so be careful of certitude, but there is one thing of which you can be certain. The only person in the history of baseball to hit 2 grand slam home runs in the same inning was, in fact, Fernando Tatis. You don't even have to look that one up. Then I have paragraph, or maybe you should. Quick footnote, then I'm going to stop and go. Okay, just quick footnote. I'm down 2 weekends ago with my granddaughters and my son in Colonial Williamsburg. And Jen takes the girls for a little bathroom break, and I'm checking my email. And there's an email. Do you have it? Yep. There's an email that comes in. Read it out, because you're not going to read the answer. So it comes in. What's the heading?
Disappointed in baseball as a road to God.
And it's from a person named Joy, and I don't know anyone named Joy, but I see the title of the book, so I'm going to read this email, and it says,
Dear Dr. Sexton, I eagerly awaited the publication of Baseball as a Road to God. My expectations were crushed in reading the chapter on doubt with the first question from Tippy. I witnessed an inside the park grand slam home run, and it was not hit by Mel Stottlemyre! Exclamation point. Upon Googling, the list is extremely long. I did not limit the search to pitchers, since you did not. Since statistics play a prominent role in your book, I hesitate to put much faith in its validity, and I have thrown it out. Transplanted East Coaster.
Okay. What did she say? How'd she say it?
Transplanted East Coaster.
So I email her back.
I do not doubt, Joy, that if you read the rest of the chapter, you will see Tippy's error is precisely the point. I hope that you will enjoy the book, which of course cannot be understood until it is read.
And then she emails back.
Yeah, and to her credit, she says, I take it as lesson learned to complete a chapter. I have retrieved the book and enjoy. Thank you for your quick response. Enjoy.
Thank you so much. Now I'm gonna ask you a couple questions, and we'll open it up to the crowd, the Manning crowd. Yeah, that was wonderful. Thank you. And I like the way you talked about how baseball was one of many possible games that could open up into an exploration of these issues of the transcendent meaning and spirituality. I think that if you ask. When I tweeted about your talk, one of my friends, a guy named Seth Killian, who's a very high-ranking member of the fighting game community, said, the more I think about it, the more I think any game approached in the appropriate way can be a path to God. And I think if you asked Bill Gates and Warren Buffett, they would say bridge, is such a game. And I think many people would have their own versions of that. But I do think that I think there's some games that lend themselves better than others. And I think baseball is one of those games. I don't think it's just the fact that you liked baseball and so it's just an arbitrary choice. What do you think are the particular qualities of baseball that lend it so well to this journey?
So there are several, and you've got it exactly right. If forced, I probably could be made to say that I think that baseball, more than any other sport, lends itself to this kind of exercise. If forced to, I prefer not to go there. And the reason is, first of all, it is a game without a clock. And it is a game where small things matter. Therefore, it arrests your attention. There's an intensity of attention that's required to watch the game well. There's also the fact that that intensity will lead to moments of ecstasy. Now you do have moments of ecstasy. When Larry Johnson hit the 4-point shot, when I'm blocking on the guy's name, Tyree, caught the ball in his helmet. I'm a fan of other sports, and those were moments of great ecstasy I shared with my son and so forth. But the difference in baseball is that it's excruciating as it builds. Yeah. A baseball game, you think of a seventh game of a playoff, it can really be an all-body experience. And then these moments of great ecstasy come. Then there's a whole set of overlay that goes as well. For example, baseball in a unique way can punish brilliance. So the fact that Mariano Rivera threw a magnificent pitch is what caused the dying quail that lost the Yankees the World Series in 2001 in Game 7. It was too good a pitch. If he'd thrown a less good pitch, it would have been a fly to the outfield. Or and there were all kinds of baseball kind of in so many ways kind of recapitulates things like the human condition. The fact that the greatest hitter in the history of baseball fails 6 times out of 10. You start playing with these elements of the sport, and then if you take it to 3.0, which is you're cultivating in a way the skills of the contemplative life as you develop your skills of watching a baseball game, and then throw in all the stuff about fathers talking to children when fathers can't talk.
Yeah. We have a class here at the Game Center called Games 101, which is sort of almost like an art history type of survey course. So we look at the whole history of games. We look at video games, but we go all the way back and we look at ancient games, look at sports. And one of the things we're trying to teach in that class is that is the skill of being able to play a game and understand it, to be able to watch a game and understand it. And one of the things I really liked about your book and your talk tonight was that little tip about not watching the ball. What other tips can I give a student who, it requires so much literacy to understand a complex sport like baseball? What are the ways in for a brand new person who wants to understand some of the beauty of the game? Where do they start? What advice can you give?
Well, first of all, I'd get a mentor. Just as you're going to enter the monastic life, you want a guru, right?
Yeah.
So I would get a mentor because, and then another thing I would do is I would develop a partner with whom I can watch actively.
Okay.
Now, it's interesting. I was on a show that somebody here at NYU did about Jackie Robinson, because Rachel Robinson is an NYU graduate. She got a PhD in nursing here, and we also gave her an honorary degree. But this show was about Jackie at the beginning of this season with the coming out of the movie and everything. And one of the questions I was asked was, if Jackie came back, what would he not like about modern baseball? And I think the person expected me to talk about steroids or the money and all that. But I said the noise. Basketball did it first. I used to be a season ticket holder for the Knicks. You cannot have a conversation if you bring 4 people to the game unless you sit 2 and 2. If you sit 4 across, the person 3 seats away from you cannot hear you at a Knicks game. And it's now become the case at Yankee Stadium. And it's this blaring and blaring. So, putting that aside for the moment, if you have a partner and you discuss the game proactively, and then I would get some of these serious baseball novels, or maybe something like Halberstad's 1949. It's a book that there's a book by an NYU graduate called 39 Innings. Somebody that analyzes the game in detail. Now that might be too much too soon, so I think the novels probably are better. Because you get these phrases. It requires, it's like you got to do finger exercises.
Yeah.
Right? And then you work your way up.
Yeah. One of the things that you mentioned in your book, C.P. Smith, and the problem, the two cultures problem,
this has me terrified.
Yeah, the university is divided. On the one side you have the hard sciences, on the other side you have the arts and the humanities. These people speak different languages. They don't read the same great works. They no longer go to the same parties, and I'm really interested in the way that games might be a path back towards recombining those things. Especially video games are an aesthetic form that requires a kind of technical understanding or a kind of rational approach of problem solving. When you talk about baseball and the spiritual qualities of baseball,
Can I interrupt
sure,
you
yeah,
just
you
a
bet.
minute there? So I think that's a profound statement, but I would hasten to add to it that there are all kinds of ways in which the arts have that same requirement. It's just not so transparent to people that aren't in the arts. Yeah. Making a film or even writing a poem has a technical level, which is the same thing, but it's not as obvious to people.
Right.
Because anybody can write, roses are red.
Right.
So they don't understand what, our faculty member who just won the Pulitzer Prize for poetry, has to do to understand it. So, but it's with this technology thing, there's clearly high math and all of that stuff.
Yeah, but even without the technology, right? So how can I put this? your book sits on my bedside table next to Nate Silver's book, The Signal and the Noise, right? Nate Silver is a guy who has a career that started in sports, analyzing sports, and in baseball especially. There's a lot of technique, there's a lot of technical understanding, there's a lot of quantitative analysis. In your book, you are highlighting the other aspects of baseball, those that illuminate the things that can't be quantified, right? That's the spiritual aspect of baseball. It's that it goes beyond instrumental rationality. And yet, it has in it all these numbers, all these stats. We're constantly trying to.
Moneyball.
How do you? Yeah. Do you feel like that you would like to downplay that aspect of the sport, or do you feel like those things come together in the beauty of
So
this?
I was very nervous about this book as I came to understand what it was going to be. Because it turned out that it couldn't be what I wanted it to be if it was just the stories from the course. And I don't think I would have written it if Lisa hadn't done it. No, I would have been proud to have her read it, and it so resonates with me as she understood me that I think she would have liked it. But I didn't speak at all publicly about my spirituality until Bill Moyers, with whom she had done a lot of work, forced me to do it openly, and then Charlie Rose did the same thing. And frankly, you noticed when I said before I didn't appear on television except for the university. After her death, which was, for those that don't know, extremely sudden, there was no warning, she was not sick. I had spoken to her half an hour previously and came back and she was gone. And she's 10 years younger than me, so it wasn't supposed to happen. So it was a very dramatic, transformative event. And I kind of try to live my life being worthy of her love, and I try to pay homage to her the same way I try to pay homage to Charlie. So it put me in a comfort zone with this. But then I realized that this is not the fashion in the research university or in the crowds in which we travel. Now, I took some solace. Now, even if I say this, if you keep up with the literature and the fashion, you'll see I was mistaken. I took some solace because a friend and colleague named Tom Nagel from the law school had gave me the first draft of a book called The Mind and the Cosmos. And Tom is kind of a synecdoche for the New York Review of Books and the public intellectual at the highest level. And I felt very comfortable that he was, from a different, yeah, he's an atheist, but he was coming in a different direction to a similar place. So I make this trichotomy in the book, that there is the known, which is what universities specialize in doing, transmitting the known. And then there's the knowable that's not yet known, that universities also specialize in finding. Maybe it'll take 1,000 years, maybe it'll be in different ways. So there's the known and the knowable. What Tom says in his book is that the ways we know will be very different 50 years from now from the ways we know now. And we shouldn't make a religion out of the ways we know now. That's oversimplifying, but that's basically, he has been eviscerated for that by his friends. Okay. I actually go a step farther. I quote a passage in which he says that in the book and say, I agree, and then I said, but I'm going to go a step farther and say, there is this category called the ineffable, the unknowable in our cognitive ways that we only know through art and music or hierophany, as Eliade would say, in baseball. So I'm out on a farther limb. And I was very nervous that this would embarrass the university. And I took some solace. The other great philosopher that was at the law school, and his dear friend recently died, his name's Ronald Dworkin. Both of these men received the equivalent of the Nobel Prize in philosophy. And Ronnie is a rabid Red Sox fan. So it was even greater trepidation that I sent him the first draft of this and asked him if he would just read it to tell me whether I should just put it on the shelf. Because I didn't want to embarrass NYU. And I figured this is kind of like getting a review from the most intelligent of my colleagues. And he actually wrote back and said, "This is beautiful, you have to send it." Now, it may have been a fact, he knew he was dying, it was about a year before his death, but he then said, "I want to give you a blurb for the book." And his is the top blurb in the back of the book, and I'm very proud of the fact that before he died, Ronnie and I spent the day talking about the book. But I tell you, I'm being as honest as it was hard, and the book has gotten uniformly, I mean, I'm not exaggerating, A+ reviews, and Publishers Weekly has named it one of the top 10 books of the quarter, and it's, making its way up, I hope. Maybe it had a blip, it got up to number 30 on the Times bestseller list. But we haven't been reviewed in the New York Times or in the review books yet. People that have eviscerated Tom, so maybe that's still to come. But the argument I make ends up being this: we are in danger as a society of creating the religion of scientism. And you come back to C.P. Snow, where you started this. I adore that. I mean, there's science around here, including your center. But the basic sciences here, the medical school, the dental school, the last 12 years has seen just a category change in where they are. I believe deeply in them. I believe, as Stephen Jay Gould said, that religion and science are two non-overlapping magisteria. One deals with trying to seize as much of the unknown and making it known, and the other deals with that which is ineffable. And this is an argument that there is important stuff. Like Lisa I did not become convinced that she loved me because she reasoned me to it. I experienced that in the same way I experienced the fact that she is still, and this is faith, I can't convince anyone of it, but I know she's still present in my life in a very palpable way. And I know that, and I believe, I should say, that she is aware. I don't think there's a green pastures or stuff like that, but I think she's aware of that, and our love will continue. And be aware of itself, other than just the butterfly effect. The kids will have grandkids and grandkids and grandkids.
But can't you?
And it's hard
can't
for
you see
a research university president to say that.
Isn't it possible that baseball is a place where those two magisteria overlap?
Sure.
Right? So it's not that they're non-overlapping.
But I'm saying life is a place where I believe in evidence-based decision making. I know there's a great book by I don't assign it to the students. I give them a whole list of things to read this summer that they generally read. There's a great book by John Robinson, the Anglican Bishop of Warwick, which is about 50 years old now, called Honest to God. And he talks in there about how, we used to think that God was up there, that we came to think he was out there, and then Paul Tillich began to talk about him as being in here. And our knowledge and our metaphors change. Look, there are some people who believe in the Bible literally. It's meaningful to them. It's a hierarchy. That's fine. I don't believe it. I used to teach in 1966 in Brooklyn, New York, at a small Catholic college. I used to say to my students, it was a minor factual detail whether Christ actually rose from the dead. The question was, do you experience Christ as risen? Who ever heard of a virgin birth, I would say to them. The kids used to confess the fact they were taking my class. So I'm not into the, it's a myth. Not the way Americans use myth, the way artists use myth.
Right, mythos.
Mythos, yeah.
I was very happy to hear you name check Huizinga, who's a big person for us as well in the Game Center. In many of our classes we read, and of course he has the famous idea of the magic circle, games as a sacred space.
I even know what name check is now.
There you go.
Nice. I wouldn't have known it before. They did it to me in one of my town halls.
And one of the things Huizinga talks about is how games open up a space outside the practical concerns of everyday life. And I guess my question for you is, how does baseball change as a result of being a big industry? What's it like for the players who have it as a job? And are they locked out of a certain kind of a pure appreciation that the fans have of it? Is it tarnished by the money that flows through it, or is that just part of the overlapping life, of that's all part of the deal?
So there are a few years when I've invited a friend to teach the class with. I go to all the classes, but sometimes it's nice to have a counterpoint. And 3 years, this extraordinary mind, a dear friend by the name of James Trout, who he used to write for the New York Times Magazine, but now he just writes books, would come. And as he said last night, he would play fact and I would play truth. And we would go back and forth on which is more important when obviously both are. But he came last night. I decided that the students should read this book after they had read the religion stuff and after they had read the novels, but before we did baseball in New York. So this is the third from the last class. And I figured it would be fun to have Jim come and teach the class. And it was very, Peter, you were there, I thought it was very revealing to me, because he and I had never discussed the book. And he said, the first thing to realize is that there are many different baseballs about which John could have written. And there are many different religions about which John could have written. Or gods. And you have to be aware of what he chose. And in a way, and he only got through the baseballs, he chose the toughest baseball, the one you just described, to be the commercialized, steroid-driven baseball of the TV contract. So baseball has to be played at night, when kids can't watch it and so forth. That's the toughest to make the case that this can lead you to the transcendent. He didn't get to the God part. My suspicion is he's going to say I chose the easiest God. Because my God is
Yeah.
It would have been harder to prove the Big Daddy in the sky,
Right.
Or the interventionist God. It's interesting. Jim did the one thing he did concede last night was he did a cover story for the New York Times Magazine on Mariano Rivera. And he reports in talking to Mariano, and I've had occasion to get to know some Major League ball players. And this young man in class affirmed this when Jim and I got into a conversation about it. For 80% of the players, so Adrian said last night, we call him AC. And in my experience, all the players I've met, they really mean it when they say they don't know what their contract is. They really mean it. They're doing it for the love of the game. And is that true of A-Rod? Well, I don't know. Okay, but Jeter, yeah, I would say, so there is still a purity, and the best example of that would be, and God bless it that he's going to be the last one to wear Jackie's number, is Mariano Rivera. This man is as close as it comes to the pure baseball player. So I think you can still find it. It's
Nice.
it's sullied.
Yeah.
But my church is sullied.
Yeah.
The last pope I could admire was John the 23rd.
Yeah.
And I don't know what this new guy will do.
Well, I really like the phrase you used, thinking strange, the phrase that Charlie talked about. And I think one of the ways that your book is an example of thinking strange is that it takes seriously the thing that you actually love, right? It's easy to say, well, I like, baseball, I like baseball a lot, but I love Shakespeare, I love James Joyce, I love Hitchcock, these are things that are up on a pedestal, and it's easy to say, yes, these are the things that are, and then baseball is whatever. But to take seriously baseball, and the toughest baseball, right? The actual commercial game that you watched as a kid and that you watched as a grown-up, and to treat it seriously, and to pay attention to it and say, no, this is an important part of my life. It's as important as these other things.
And the interesting
That's
is,
beautiful.
last night when Jim challenged the class, tell me if I'm wrong on this, but my recollection is 4 students immediately, all of them women. Okay, and 2 of them said, I never reflected on it. It was all relationship to father. Every single one of them, but they affirmed the fact that baseball brought them to someplace that it wasn't just being a fan. Because Jim made the point in terms of my son, and I actually called my son up on the cell phone and got him. And he said, you know, I've watched Jed, and John had this thing in the 50s with the Dodgers. That was different. It kind of had all the build-up. And Jed, who's a Yankee fan and has been since 1969, when I gave him, he was baptized and became a Yankee fan. And later he was bar mitzvahed, and today he's Jewish, and you know his wife is Jewish, and she converted to Judaism because of Lisa, and the grandchildren are Jewish. My Irish Catholic, my sister's husband, my Irish Catholic brother-in-law says not since Abraham as a Gentile we've got as many Jews as John. but he's still a Yankee fan, and I took seriously deciding what team to give him.
Wow.
Because I knew that was more important than the religion I was going to give him.
Wow. I love that. I think we have a few minutes left of your time, so let's open it up and see if there are any questions from people.
Masad, I'm not. I can stay till 9.
Okay.
Okay.
Good.
I don't know what time it is. I can't see the clock.
Great. Well, I think we have people who'd love
That
to
man back there
ask
will
you
shoot me
questions.
because I'm due an appointment.
Okay, I'll put a little clock out here for us. Yes, in the back. Yes.
Hi.
Could you tell me who you are?
My name's Rita. I'm studying mechanical engineering at Poly.
Welcome.
And I'm from San Francisco and a diehard Giants fan.
I'm so sorry about that.
I'm sorry, we don't have like ESPN on demand in the dorms or something. I can't watch any of the games till I go home. But I was wondering if when student bias and opinion comes into play in the class, if it's more the religion that comes into play or the whatever team they support in baseball.
Well, it's really interesting you ask that because the data that's on the table, now maybe this will change in the last 2 weeks, okay? In the last 2 weeks, because you get these old people talking about the halcyon day, right, in illo tempore, we then begin to elicit from the students how they feel. But the data so far has been very kind of objective. There hasn't been a lot. Jim did challenge the class this week because this book kind of brings you into that space. But up until now, it's been, you know, for Roy Hobbs in The Natural, is baseball a religion? You know, so it's a little bit, they don't have, now, I'll tell you this, the class becomes very comfortable revealing itself. You know, like it was interesting. This week, 3 of the students, this 3 out of 16, brought girlfriends. And none of them was troubled that I said, okay, 0 to 10, you know, 6, this guy there's a chance he's the real thing, 7, you know, maybe 10, you know. It was because we're in it together. So there's a lot of self-revelation. So I wasn't surprised with this, but so far in the course it's not about that. Now the interesting, when you get to the last classes, I've always asked, do you have something in your life today that's like this? Like what we're describing, what the old people are describing. And more often than not, the answer is no. And I find that sad. You know, now it's changed. My grandmother always said self-praise things, so I'm not praising myself. I'm praising whatever is going on here that Doris and Tom and Peter saw that caused the book to be. I get emails from more than half of the students continually saying that they look at life differently because of the course. Right? I mean, you would.
I'm one of them. So yes.
So I don't think the fact that you were a San Francisco. In fact, we kind of make something. There were even Red Sox fans in the class. We got 2 St. Louis fans this year. That's yeah. So we do have a Giant fan in the class.
What grade do they get though?
Red Sox fans shouldn't have been admitted in the first place. For them to get Fs is only a ratification of that. Would it affect you?
Well, when I listen to stories about the Yankees, I don't read as much as when I listen to stories about the Giants, so I think it would.
Is the same thing true when you hear stories about the Greeks?
Maybe, no. Maybe,
So it just means I'm not a good storyteller.
no,
I'm serious.
Well, no one ever
Yeah,
talks
that's
about
true.
West Coast baseball anyway, so it's not a big deal.
Yeah.
Yeah, hi. I had a question
Did
actually
you say who you
about.
are?
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm Jesse Fuchs. I teach at the Game Center.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm interested in what you have to say about teams because my personal experience with baseball, which has always seemed to be an outlier, is I'm intensely attached to the game, and I'm intensely attached to particular players.
Yeah.
But I've always been in the rooting for laundry camp when it comes to, I just don't understand
Especially with free agency.
Yeah, maybe I came up
I
at
mean,
a
back
time
in the old
where,
days when the Dodgers lived in the neighborhood, it was a little
right,
different.
and if I was an Orioles fan and with Cal Ripken for 20 years, that might, I mean, there might have been a different
Right.
relationship between player and team, but my
Or that
favorite
radio
players.
deregulation, see, free agency.
But what, yeah, I mean, what is the, I mean, again, I know that's not the usual experience, but I like watching baseball, and I will get attached to a team because someone is playing for them, but then I'll switch if they, you know, what is it about a team, given that sort of Lincoln's axe, you know, you switch out this guy, you switch out that guy, it's the same team, that,
That's a great point. I'd say the chapter you might be interested in reading is the chapter on saints and sinners. And it's really interesting to see how the same player, take Johnny Damon for example, okay, revered by Red Sox fans, but then he comes to the Yankees and they put out a T-shirt. Remember what Johnny Damon looked like? He had a beard and long hair and so forth. It says, looks like Jesus, throws like Mary, acts like Judas. And of course the Yankee fans that had been crushed when he hit the grand slam home run in Game 7, all of a sudden this guy was the greatest thing going. And for the Dodgers back in my time, Sal Maglie was an example of that. Now I do not know what would have happened to me if Jackie Robinson actually had not retired when he was traded to the Giants. People forget that about Jackie. The Dodgers traded Jackie Robinson to the Giants. And this great man, that was one of the reasons he's my hero, retired. I don't know how the movie treats that. I haven't seen it yet. But but what is it? I think it's stuff like community. You know, I mean, I accept your point. Baseball has lost a lot because of free agency. It's created a caste system, a caste system that can be overcome. That's been shown by Oakland and others. But the idea that the Yankees, I believe it is that Cano was the only starting player in the lineup this year who was in the starting lineup last year. Now it's got a lot to do with injuries. It's also got the fact that we got these people. Who are they? You know, Hafner. I used to, you know, maybe when I had my rotisserie league team. Yeah. So I agree with you. It really has robbed something about it. And I don't know enough to know what it does with kids. When Dougie and I played stoop ball, we played the players. Every throw was a player, and that was an important part of that identification. So I'm sure it's had an effect, but I could point you to things mostly around the notion of community and people's coming together, and year after year going to the game with the same people. You know, and yes, that it is laundry. Now Tom Oliphant, see, Tom and Doris and I responded completely differently to the Dodgers leaving Brooklyn. Okay? I remained a Dodger fan and then became a Yankee fan for my son. Doris walked away from the sport, but then by accident was taken on a date to Fenway and became a Red Sox fan for her children, and recapitulates that. Tom has never been able to root for another team. He is a pure baseball fan. Now, my brother-in-law Mike, who's been my friend for 55 years, and finally had the good sense to marry my sister 30 years ago, who was a Giant fan, became a Yankee fan because of our relationship and the ability to partner the way we talked about. We were kind of advanced, but we partnered. But steroids has caused him to walk away from the game. So, you know, people react to it differently, as they do with religion.
You know, it's funny. I'm going to make a confession. I came late to sports. I like sports now. I didn't like them particularly growing up, and one of the things that bothered me was team fandom, team-based fandom. I couldn't get over the fact that It's arbitrary. Did these people know it was arbitrary that you just root for this team? They say, oh, this team is the best. No, you just happen to be born there, or you know.
What about
and-
being born
and
a
it-
Jew? Or a
Right,
Greek?
and then it took me a long time to realize, oh no, actually, I think most sports fans understand that it's arbitrary, and that in fact is part of the beauty of it, right? Is that they make a choice, that it is that they recognize that it's that their true identity as a person is so complicated. There's so many conflicting, different pressures on them as a person, who they are ethnically and socially and in terms of politically and everything else. But here's something where they can take it on, and it's a pure identity, that they're just a fan of this team all the way through, and so they get to kind of perform a kind of belonging that we don't get.
Right.
And
But you
that
could
is that.
see
And
that-
it's, I'm seeing a new angle on this because of your book.
I accept it. I do want you to see structurally it's the same thing as most people are born into their religion.
Yeah,
Okay, and yet they kill them.
yeah.
Okay, at least except in soccer, people don't kill over the sport.
And then
The-
and in some ways that makes sport better,
But
right?
well,
Yeah.
that's what.
Yeah.
That's Homo ludens, right?
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
the better part of man. But
Yeah.
but don't you see where it would be still more beautiful if we
Oh,
were
yeah.
back in the time when, and that was one of the good things about the Yankees of the mid-90s, is that core. You know,
Yeah.
it was Giambi, you know, who was a great player. But his advent changed the Yankees dramatically. Joe Torre became a different manager. I've known Torre since he was in high school. I was a debater, not a baseball player, but I caught a ball that Joe Torre hit as a high school guy through a window into a room where I was debating. So I didn't really catch it. I picked it up.
Yeah.
But we've known, yeah, and Torre became a base-to-base manager. He became an American League manager instead of playing small ball the way he did earlier. You know, that began the departure of that team, and then we were hoping on these great pitches like Kennedy and Hughes and so forth that came along, but they've all kind of Chamberlain.
Yes.
Hi.
The side guy in the suit.
I'm sorry about the clothes. I can't help it. I'm Wayne Marquez. I just want to say something to John about the tying of sports into religion and putting them together.
And civil procedure.
That's right. A lot of these guys in here make games, and for them, it's a passion, it's a religion, and they want to have that connectedness. And what you were able to do is tie baseball to religion, but at the end of the day, and this is my own view of you, is you're a teacher. And you really want.
Charlie. I'm just a Charlie. No, I'm just a Charlie knockoff.
But
I have not. Everything I do has professionally has been affected by him.
But you want to share knowledge. You want to get people to think. And I think if anything, if there's a takeaway from everything, especially if you're not a baseball fan, that's probably the most important thing. If there's a takeaway, is getting so passionate about something, but also giving them the opportunity to learn more beyond maybe what's on the surface.
Right. Exactly.
So I just want to thank you for that.
That's why the subtitle of the book is "Seeing Beyond the Game."
Yeah, which you do by looking deeply into the game. That's the trick. People tend to look away and say, okay, well, it's either the game or these other issues. But no, you can go all the way through, look all the way deeply into the game, and then get to the world beyond.
Right,
Yeah,
right.
that's so beautiful. Yes.
Arthur, still from Brooklyn. In my own research into the history of sports, I came to the conclusion that every single society since antiquity has had two elements, something it calls religion and something it calls sports. If you agree with that, why do you think that is?
Well, I think it's these. Religion is the word we use for that which is fundamental, the most fundamental. Right? You know, you could dress it up in terms of, you know, like the Catholic Church mirroring the Roman Empire because of the Council in Constantinople in 313. You know, this stuff I do know. He doesn't. But you know, so all of the structures and power relationships that come and so forth. But at its essence, religion is the label we use for that which takes us to the deepest place. And I think that sports play is the purest form of human activity. It's when we're freest.
So do you think that it's essential that every society does have something?
I mean, I think it's an oversimplification to say that those are the only two things that are consistent. There are a lot of other things that are consistent that go back all through society.
But is a sport consistent in every society? You think you'd find in every society something that society calls a sport?
Oh yeah, certainly if you broaden sport the way we've been using it here to mean play, then I think there's no question about that. But I just would caution you. I think there are a lot of other things that we would like you would love. Okay, it's obviously been part of every human society.
But religion and sports, they're sort of organized activities.
Can be.
You know.
Not always. Religion's not always organized.
Ilya?
Hi, I'm Noe Zaremski. I'm an MFA student at the Game Center here. Thanks very much for this talk. Couple quick questions. One, you mentioned baseball novels. I'm curious if you have any opinion about this new one, The Art of Fielding. Another is cricket. If you have any thoughts on cricket, because it seems like a sibling game to baseball, and in many ways pushes the things that make baseball different from many other sports even further. And then finally, I mean, just, you know, in full ignorance and with full respect, but as a game student, I have to say, I feel like you're looking at it the wrong way. It's more about how God is a road to baseball.
Give me the quote. So you know, let me just, I'll take the first two, but then I got to show you. You're so close to Ronald Dworkin, it's unbelievable. Let's take, what was the first
Art of
question?
Fielding.
Oh, The Art of Fielding. So, it's not an accident that my two disciplines are law and religion, which are both exegetical disciplines that require very careful attention to a small number of words. So this is one of the courses I teach. The other three courses, I teach 4 courses every year. The other 3 courses I teach are all on 16 words. Government shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. And I spent with 3 very different groups of students, Muslims in Abu Dhabi, students from around the world in Abu Dhabi, and Americans largely here. It is so different in each of those 3 classes to just spend a whole semester talking about nothing but those 16 words and what they mean. And that's deep exegesis or interpretation. So it's very different from this course. But the reason I specialize in those, that type of discipline, which both law and religion are, whether you're doing the Constitution or the Quran, is I'm an excruciatingly slow reader. So I really had to labor through Art of Fielding, and it was such a social event, and so obviously, I got so many copies of it given, sent to me for this course. And it's a very good book. I mean, I enjoyed it greatly. It's not a baseball book in my opinion. Okay, it would be like saying that, now William Kinsella is one of my favorite authors. Jim Trout would go crazy. But he did Shoeless Joe, which Phil Dreams was made from. We do the Iowa Baseball Confederacy. Jim says he's a very shallow author. I don't know enough to know that, but he wrote an uproarious book called Box Socials, which was the first of his books I read, that starts with Bob Feller and ends with Bob Feller, but it's really not a baseball book. And that's the way I view it. So I put it in the syllabus and then took it out of the syllabus. Second question was?
Cricket.
Cricket. I don't know enough about cricket. Okay, I accept the hypothesis that it could, but to me, I'm in the position that he was in when he said to me, baseball's boring. And, if the only music you know is the finger exercises, you're not going to think that Beethoven's Ninth is possible. And then the last question was Dworkin, right? You and Dworkin, Soul Brothers. So, the interesting, I'll read you Ronnie's blurb. Okay, and what I want you to notice is that he doesn't give an inch, this brilliant man. You know, I read it, and like all language, it's like those take me out, I say, could I tell the students that my courses are about being in love. Even when I teach the first 16 words of the First Amendment, I want you to learn about the Constitution. I also want you to learn that when we speak, I mean, even as we spoke earlier today, in a very important environment, we were in a meeting together, and I'm very conscious of the fact that when I say something, that what I say probably has at least 5 different meanings that are plausible. And there may be the 60% meaning and the 20% meaning and whatever. This is all exegesis. And if a person in whom I have trust says something and I experience it as absurd or angering or whatever, the first thing I should do is say, wait a minute, am I processing it the way it's intended? And that's what being in love is about, is giving the person, each going the 80%. So when I read Dworkin's blurb, I thought it was phenomenal, but then I realized, the son of a bitch, listen to it, because I thought he was saying this book about religion, you know, it's okay to elevate religion, but he may be saying it's okay to say that that religion is no more than baseball. Okay, it's a transitive. Listen, he says, John Sexton has written beautifully about the magic of baseball, its near irresistible appeal, its legends, its breathtaking moments of drama, its heroes, and its villains. First sentence. He has also written with great insight, listen to the way he describes religion, about the intense felt character of the religious perception. And then he gives a third sentence. And he has, dare I say it, woven the two together miraculously. Now that is a completely Delphic comment. You know, that son of a gun, Ronnie, he did it to me again, right? He trumped me, he checkmated me. You know, because he could say to his friends, all I said was that religion stuff is, you know, so Richard Dawkins says it's all voodoo or Santa Claus. I said it's all baseball. So when you turn the equation around, I accept it. Just as I accept it.
And I think with that, we might need to wrap it up if we're...
You've been very, very patient. I just thank you all for it. You know, our lives here are about kind of discharging you into the world with enthusiasm for knowledge and creativity. And, you know, back a couple of generations, okay, kind of the grandfather, I know it's not the same, but there is a relationship between ITP and this program. And ITP was created by this magnificent woman who still, you know, walks our streets, but in Red Burns. The first, when Lisa and I graduated from law school in 1979, we went down to Washington for 2 more years. She worked at the Carter White House, and I worked at the Supreme Court. And then I came to NYU. And she knew she didn't want to be a lawyer, so she took a job as a program officer at a foundation, which she later ran. The first grant she gave was to Red Burns for something called Apple Bites, on the newly emerging thing no one had ever heard of, called the cable television. And this guy, Gus Hauser, had created this thing in England with having rock stars stand against the wall and sing their songs that he was looping on something called MTV. And Nickelodeon then came after that from the same line. But Red Burns and Lisa were so close. Lisa's mother died. And to this day, you know, Red is like her alter mother.
Yeah, the roots of the Game Center are very much in ITP.
So I bless what you people do, and I want you to know it's we just go out there and think that strange stuff with all that brilliance you have, and you'll be finding all kinds of ways to go. I accept it.